Okay, I'm here with NintendudeX. I'm going to do one of my new series, Reflections as this one's called. And so the first place I want to start with you, just because it's funny, before we go into any of the history stuff, I've never seen what your response to this was, but everyone on Reddit loves that video where Diamond Procs, someone tells him in stream, like, someone put something in stream like, NintendudeX equals NA over EU or something, and Diamond Procs, I think, genuinely didn't know who you were, so he like Googles it, and then his Leaguepedia pops up, and then because he's a witty guy, he's like, "Oh, NA, goodbye," and then closes it instantly. Like, what did he see that? What did he think of it?
I saw it. I thought it was really funny. I mean, I don't expect him to really know who I am, just because I don't think we've solidified ourselves at all as like a great NA team, or like someone that he would even threaten someone like him in Gambit Gaming. So, you know, I thought it was pretty funny. A cute little gesture for him to play it off like, "Oh, NA, goodbye." I'm a little pleased that he didn't have anything bad to say about me, which is like nice to know. But yeah, other than that, like, that's cool.
Okay, I mean, I'll come back to Diamond Procs later. I just wanted to start out with that. So let's go back in history then, because in this first team, like the first place I ever noticed your team was whenever I was researching all these European teams. The famous one is when Against All Authority came to NA. Everyone was saying like, "Oh, well, you know, without Moscow 5 there, they're going to like win the event, or they're going to come top 3. They're going to crush all these NA teams who are just bad." And it would be one thing if they just lost to TSM and CLG, but actually they lost to your team, Monomaniac, at the time. And at the time, no one knew any of these names. These weren't like top players. Were you really just a team completely out of nowhere? Like now people recognize the names if I said them, you know, Wild Turtle, you, some of the others. But at the time, were you complete nobodies? Was that one of your first events? Yeah,
I mean, we were nobodies coming into the event. People kind of heard us about a week before because we were playing, obviously we qualified for the tournament, but we also like, I remember beating TSM in like some weird IPL invitational thing like a week before that as well. People were like, "Oh wow, like these guys are legit. They didn't beat, you know, Moscow 5 just because of ping. They can really play." So we were kind of out of nowhere. People kind of knew to look out for us coming into the event, like knowing like they can play really well, but still the top 3 in NA's Dignitas, CLG, TSM. You want to talk along lines of like AAA or?
Yeah.
I guess about Against All Authority. We lost our first round to Dignitas, which kind of hurt because we won that first game in the series actually. We were really like pumped to win the next one too. And we honestly got leads in the second and third games. We just kind of threw it, which is, I guess, something you expect of a newer team, like a younger team. We were really young at the time. Against All Authority, we just came in the next morning and we were playing them pretty early on a Saturday morning. We didn't have any problem with them at all. Like, really, that was kind of a thing when we played EU teams in Season 2. Like, we did not struggle with them. Like, we kind of came aggressive in the lanes, and we would just, like, slowly close the game out, and that was, like, okay. And it's kind of weird because, you know, Against All Authority, they were in the Season 1 finals. They were still a very strong team. A lot of the names, like Yellow Star, were on that team that you would probably still recognize.
Soaz?
Yeah, Soaz, absolutely. I almost forgot about that. But yeah, they were a really good team, and we just managed to kind of beat them with not much of an issue as a really young team. So that was like a really big confidence boost for us, and especially me, because going into the event, I remember thinking on the plane, like, it'd be nice if we could just get a kill against these teams. Like, that'd be fantastic.
The strange thing is, usually when I see a team like that, okay, they come out of nowhere, it's their first event, they do quite well, like you finish 4th overall. Usually I would almost bet money, like, okay, they'll think they're really good. Like, oh, this is, you know, because it's like almost the dream of like a young player, like, oh, I go to my first event, I'm owning everyone, oh, it turns out I'm really good. But actually, usually reality sets in, like next event, you're probably going to bomb out in the first 2 games, and then you're going to be like, oh, actually, maybe we were lucky that event, or people, even worse, like it was a surprise factor, people didn't know who they were, and so next time they're prepared, you know, like you're not going to win versus the top teams. But actually, you went to the next event, and what's hilarious is almost the exact same thing happened. You even beat the French team, which was most of those same guys out of AAA had left and formed Millennium, and it was almost the same team. You had almost the same team, you beat them, and you went on a similar run to like top 3, I think, this time. Like, what were you thinking there? Because like the way I set it up like that, did you really think after the first one, like, did you ever even consider maybe it was a fluke? Like maybe we weren't on people's radar and stuff? What did you think in the next one where you had like another Cinderella type run?
Honestly, going into the event of IPL 4, we felt Dignitas was the strongest team. And they only took 3rd place there. And just taking a game off of them was like, yeah, like we can really do this. We kept really level-headed about it. We were still young, so we were all balancing school and stuff. So it's not like, we didn't really expect to like just destroy everybody like kind of Moscow 5 was at the time. like just like doing well was good for us. And we actually went into that MLG and knocked off a lot of European names again. We even beat Fnatic that tournament, I remember, and we ended up taking 4th place in that tournament, and only top 4 was money. So like, we were able to get money out of it, which was like pretty cool to us. And like names that were below us, like Fnatic, CLG, EU, we were ahead of those teams, like in the standings, which was like, again, really thrilling for us. And that was like, I think at that point we realized like, yeah, the NA scene is growing, and like we're here to stay.
So the thing that's confusing is your team has like these 4th places, and then you even have that Gigabyte line where you came 4th, which was still like decent teams,
Yeah.
not many international, obviously. So you had these 3 4th places in a row, and then out of nowhere your team kicks you out, or you leave, and then Atlanta comes in instead. Like, why would your team make the change when it seems like you're on the brink of becoming like a better team, you know?
Yeah. I remember, I just want to talk about a little bit about the Gigabyte LAN. Honestly, we 3-0'd the group. Like, there was a group stage, and then it led into a bracket.
Yeah.
So we 3-0'd the group. We played the worst team out of the other group. So we just crushed them. We demolished them. We expected to. And then we played CLG Black in the next round, that was a team like, wow, like, I think that was their first LAN, really.
Yeah, it could be, I think.
And, a lot of names on that team, too. There's Link, Zuna. People make fun of it. It's like, oh, Vulcan or XTGG is CLG Black. No, that's because they had Zuna, Psycho Sid, who's now Benny, and Bloodwater on that team. They also had Link, who's now in CLG, and Hoodstomp, who doesn't really play anymore. But they were kind of like in the situation we were just a few months ago, where like they were a really hot up-and-coming team. And I just remember I wanted to win that event so bad because we knew Dignitas wasn't going to be there, and Dignitas was a team that we felt was like the hardest matchup for us. We lost to them in IPL4, MLG, and we were like, all right, they're not there. Like, we can probably match up against TSM this time and win the finals. And the funny thing is, if we would have beaten CLG Black, we'd have played TSM in the finals. And I was just thinking, like, how cool would it be for me to like win a LAN event, let alone one before I even turned 18? Like, that'd be so cool. And it was just such a disappointing set against CLG Black. Like, I think that was at the point where a little bit of the arrogance set in. And we were like, oh, CLG Black. Pff. Like, I even remember talking to Travis before the game. Like, Travis probably wasn't that popular then, but he was still like a journalist. He was like, oh, well, you guys are going to win. CLG Black's still a really like very new team. Like, they're not going to beat you.
I'm not instigating.
And the team was like, oh, yeah, heck yeah, we're just going to crush them. I'm just sitting here like, guys, like, we don't know anything about them. So, yeah, being a young team, like, I knew they had the possibility they could beat us, and they just crushed us. And then, we we were like on tilt, so we lost the 3rd place match to CLG, so we took 4th there. That was really, really disappointing. I felt we could have won that event, and that was like really where we could have solidified ourselves at like, these guys are scary.
So what about you getting replaced then?
And that kind of is where my frustration grew, because I was really frustrated that we were putting in all this work, because the Gigabyte LAN was the weekend after MLG, so we decided to stay the week because it was during everybody's summer break. We're like, we'll just stay the week. Our Team Dynamic was paying for it. They found us a LAN center. We just went there and practiced. And at the time, that was kind of unheard of to like practice every day for like some of the lower tier teams. Like, we were able to do that. We were doing pretty well. You could still kind of see some of the arrogance in the scrims because they weren't like that dead serious back then. Like, I really wanted to win personally, but not everybody else like took them as seriously, which was kind of frustrating. Kind of led to me getting booted off the team. I was admittedly a little bit harsh on some of the members, especially Paradoxical. Me and him just ended up not getting along very well. I was very hard on him about getting better because I thought he was like a prodigy of mid lane. Like, he was just crushing everybody. He was very known for his Cassiopeia that got banned like every tournament, every game. And he did really well against like some of the names he was able to beat, like Skara, XPK. Even Reginald at the time was like, dude, like, you're really good. Just put your mind to it. Let's win. It just didn't seem like it was there for him. He had his mind on other things. So I kind of had a falling out. We kind of had a bad argument. And then I decided not to play with my team for like an offline event, not online event. It was like one of the random, like, it's like a GG Classic or something. I think it was hosted by GG Chronicle. And I didn't play with them, and they had Atlanta sub for me. I guess they did pretty well. I didn't play because I was like really frustrated and just wanted to like kind of not. I was just like too angry. I didn't want to like hurt the team. So they did really well with Atlanta, and they approached me like, all right, well, I'm sorry, but we're keeping Atlanta. And that, like, even though they played well, it really shocked me. which is really weird looking back. At the time, I was like, okay, like I'm free, like I don't have to deal with this shit anymore. But then really going back to like my real life, it was kind of like for about a month, it was like, I really enjoyed what I was doing like in esports, like what I was doing there. That was really, really fun. You know, even though it was kind of hard with some of my teammates, like sometimes I wanted more out of them. Like I could make it work and I should probably try to have a little more fun with it too. So they were doing really poorly and they approached me to rejoin, and you know I felt really bad. We apologized, we made up, and I rejoined, and that was like a week before the next MLG event. I'm pretty sure.
So is it too cynical to say like if their team had done really well at the IPL event, then your career might have ended because I mean they did terribly. So
absolutely.
That's why suddenly they brought you back.
They took last place at that event after coming off consistent like fourth and like really high like online event like first, second, like really good standings online, so they really expected to do well, and then like taking last, that was just unacceptable, especially with the season 2 regionals were so close. They like needed to get it together, so they decided like, you know, maybe we can work with Nintendude. It was really working, so let's try that again.
Because the thing is, that lineup must have had something about it. Because when you then came back, you then had the next event where you came third, and you only lost to Dignitas, and you even took a series off Dignitas. So what was it about that lineup, and what was it about that event? Like, how were you able to put all these events together of like fourth, you know?
I think one of the things about that lineup is we really all kind of understood each other, and you know it's kind of cheesy, but as a way we really grew as a team because we were all around the same age, we liked the same things. Like we really, you know, if I could put my bitchiness aside and, you know, stop wanting the team to do better and like getting so upset over little mistakes, like we could really be a top tier team. But like it was really fun with those guys too, and we really liked each other, and the communication was like really easy after we got a flow. Also, I think me and Zion Spartan have always kind of had a thing. Obviously, we've been on a team for 2 years together now, and I really think like that synergy in general has really like propelled a lot of success.
The sick thing is, at the next event, the regionals, you lost to Dignitas in the first round.
Yeah.
Like, if you look at your career in this period, you always lost to Dignitas, except the one series you won when it didn't matter because you had to play another best of 3 and they beat you. So it was always Dignitas for like the nemesis, and yet you never got to play TSM. You got to play CLG, you got to play Curse, you never got to play TSM though. So what do you think about, what was it about Dignitas that they always beat you, and what do you think about never getting the chance to play TSM, even though TSM were the ones winning all those events?
You know, it kind of hurt to see TSM win all those things because online we played very well against them, and like the few times we scrimmed them, like scrims weren't really a thing back then, but we did really well against them. Were they a better online team? We didn't get to know, or a better offline team? We didn't get to know if they were the better offline team and they preferred online because we never played them. We just wanted the opportunity to play them because we felt we could beat them, and we knew like there's something about Dignitas we just couldn't crack. And, you know, they were really kind of our kryptonite for so many tournaments. They knocked us out of, or knocked us to the losers bracket of. And, you know, they continued to have, like, top 3 success. It's like, damn, we could be there if we just beat them once.
How would you describe that Dignitas team? Because if you look, okay, at the CLG lineup, they had, like, all these, like, superstar names, you know, from Season 2 and Season 1. Then you look at TSM, and, okay, their team won every event, so obviously they were the best or whatever.
Yeah.
What was weird about Dignitas?
Dignitas, it seemed like going into every event, they had something up their sleeve that we just couldn't figure out. A lot of the time, I remember one of the times it was like a Soraka Mundo type thing where Soraka would go mid, shred your MR, and then Mundo would cleaver you for like a bajillion damage. Or there's like a funny hotshot clip of him saying that. And there's always something. And then I remember them running a really good poke comp at the Season 2 regionals. Like a ridiculous poke comp they just massacred CLG with. And they just always had something up their sleeve, so there's just something about them that we were like, damn, like we can't figure them out. We don't even know what to ban. So they were just too much for us, really, just from like before the game even started. I think is where they got a lot of their advantage against us.
When you think of that era of time, and like you were going to your first events and you're having these good results, were you ever someone who, when you see, okay, when you've been playing online and you've seen the other people playing LAN tournaments, when you see like a Hotshot GG or Double Lift or whoever else is like a good player at the time, were you ever someone who, like, they had a status above you? Did you always think of yourself as at their level? What was your mindset at the time?
Going into IPL4, this is way back at IPL4, you know, I considered myself below them. But as I started to go to more and more tournaments, I think by the Season 2 regionals, I considered myself like, okay, I'm in there with them now. Like, I've gone to enough events. I've competed against them and done well. Like I'm probably at their level at this point. But I've always tried to stay like really humble about it. Like I still think some players are a lot better than others. Like including in my role, I think highly of a lot of other people. And but I mean, you don't let it get to your head once you get there, or else you just end up falling or like getting content with just being there, and then you like all of a sudden your team doesn't want you anymore. So ever since I got kicked that first time, I've really tried to keep a level head of where I am. But like, yeah, it did kick in by about the end of season 2. Like, okay, I'm in there now. I'm part of the scene.
One of the things that fans maybe don't understand about esports is that obviously there's a correlation, okay? The absolute best teams who win all the big events tend to have the best sponsors and tend to have the best players as well. It tends to go hand in hand, okay?
Yeah.
But it's possible that a team can do really well at a few events and they might never get any proper sponsors, and they might never get, because maybe the business people behind the scenes aren't the right people, or how could your team come top 4 at all these events and then not be set up to be like a curse, someone you're even outplacing? You know, how could you not get like a good organization behind you with the same lineup?
Yeah, honestly, that had probably a lot of one of two things. Was that we were really young and we didn't know where to look. There might have even been people seeking us and we didn't even know, you know? And so we didn't know anything about like the sponsors. Really, we saw like, okay, CLG and TSM, those guys are big, but like now that I know more about the esports scene, it's like there's like the Evil Geniuses, there's Quantic, there's Complexity, there's all these names that like are in the scene now and want to be in the scene that probably wanted to be back then too, just like we didn't know how to find them or they didn't know how to find us. I think that's probably the biggest thing. And the other thing was we were really content with Team Dynamic just for them paying us to go to the events. That's why we stayed with them for so long. And really, we would have continued probably to be Team Dynamic into season 3 if they didn't really fall apart as an organization.
So one of the players I mentioned before you played with at the time was Wild Turtle.
Yes.
And if we say that now, any modern day fans can be like, oh, he's so sick, his mechanics are awesome, he's amazing. Oh, obviously he was always going to be a top player. But actually, even before he got the call up to TSM, when he got that call up, like, oh, he's going to replace Chaos, that was still like a surprise to most people. Some people were like, who? Like, how is that possible that someone could be that mechanically good, and yet A, he's not picked up by a top team, and B, he's almost not even on the radar of some of the other. I mean, like, other teams out there could have done with an AD carry who are star teams, like a Curse maybe, and they don't even think about the person. How can that be?
There's another part. There's a lot of things to that as well. I think one of it being a lot of the teams tend to get really. A lot of the teams tend to be really friendly with each other and maybe not look for if there's really somebody better, because like they have faith in their teammates. So like, okay, he'll get better. But there still is like a lot of raw talent out there, and Wild Turtle is definitely one of them. And you know, I knew Turtle was good at whatever he wanted to do because he played top lane for us on Monomaniac. Unfortunately, couldn't attend the LAN event due to like family stuff. He played mid lane competitively. He's playing AD carry competitively now, and he's like a top AD carry. This guy's just good, and I think people slowly caught on. But honestly, for players that aren't even going to these events, it's kind of hard to get noticed. Like solo queue, it seems like solo queue isn't enough to get noticed, because I know a lot of great players in solo queue that just right over people's heads, like they don't even think of.
So when I say Wild Turtle now, okay, people are going to expect you to be like, oh, I always knew he'd be a top player. For sure he was going to get in one of the top teams. And vice versa, if I ask you to name another player from that lineup, and you'd be like, oh, I really thought he was amazing because like he's an ex-teammate. But if you give me like the real answer, if I'd have asked you like end of 2012, like will Wild Turtle get into a top 3 team? Will some of the other members of that lineup get into a top 3 team? Who would you have said? What would your expectations have been?
At the end of 2012, you mean like after the season 2? I would have definitely said like Zion Spartan, obviously.
Okay, why?
Zion is just, he's an incredibly hard worker. He wants to win. He loves what he does. And he's just a great person to be around. He's very energetic, maybe too energetic sometimes. He's a really friendly person, and like it's really easy to get along as a team when he's there. So he's kind of that goofball. But I mean, if you asked me in 2012 if Wild Turtle would be on a competitive team by now, I would have probably said yes if that's what he wants. Because a lot of players, you know, they're just okay at being good at League of Legends. They just like want to, you know, do real life stuff and like be good at that, and you know, do whatever they want to do with their life. But yeah, I always knew that he was a really talented player, and not a lot of people knew that. I remember reaching out to him like at least one or two other times even after we had Zion Spartan, who's like such a big name now for top one, like, hey dude, you want to come back? Like we're a really good team now. And it's just like it's not what he wanted. It's just like, no, it's cool. Like, no, I'll do my own thing. Because like he was in high school, was doing that. So like really there's a lot of talent that just like doesn't want it quite yet. And I think Turtle finally hit him that like all right, I can make this big, and this would be really cool to like have a shot at TSM. And he sees that opportunity, and he's got to love his life right now. It seems like he loves his teammates, and you know he's on top of the world right now as far as NA goes. Maybe not the world, but you know he's become an idol at this point, and it's really exceptional to see.
One of the things is when I first started doing League of Legends interviews, it was actually towards the end of 2012.
Okay.
And so this was the era when like the top three in NA was pretty set. It was like TSM, Dignitas, CLG, and really you could almost mix up like CLG and Dignitas, but it was always going to be TSM number one. And so people had a mentality of like, okay, there's those three, then maybe Curse is like fourth. And those four teams used to talk about each other like we're the big four, there's no one else, like it's only amongst us really. And you know, that's just the mentality they had. And the reason that's strange is because when I used to do interviews with them, they would even say stuff like, you know, oh, the reason we can't beat the international teams is because there's no good practice. You know, we basically just practice the other three teams and then that's it, and there's no one else. And then I would ask them, for example, when like CLG would make these weird roster moves, I'd be like, you know, why not just recruit like a real jungler? And they'd be like, there are no real junglers. Like, they're already in all the teams. And so I initially, because I didn't know much about the scene, I was like, well, I have to take that at face value. Maybe they know what they're talking about. But then as time's gone on, we've seen all these teams. So your team was finishing fourth at all these tournaments in a row, which should have suggested at least some of those players must be good.
Yeah.
Then you had like Wild Turtle, who comes now out of nowhere into TSM. Even worse than that, you had the example of CLG spent all this time telling us, oh, there's no good supports, there's no good junglers. And so then obviously like Bloodwater from their B team and other members of their B team make a team become even better than them and now above them.
Yeah.
Was there always this... Like, have I characterized this correctly? Was there always this talent just below those four teams and they just wouldn't even consider them?
There is so much talent below those teams. Like, kind of how there's like a top four, there was also kind of like a bottom four at the time, too. At the time, I think it was Orbit, it was Monomaniacs, well, we were Team Dynamic. It was Orbit, Team Dynamic, Legion, and the team MTW that was like...
NTWNA with ManCloud.
With ManCloud in them. And then there was... Damn, who's the other team that went to the playoffs there?
Who was on it?
Who took it? It was TSM Evo, but TSM Evo disbanded, so like they were out of there, and then like so there was four, and then like Legion disbanded, and then kind of CLG Black took their place. So there's always like four like lower tier teams who felt like there's talent here, like you can practice us, we'll be great. But honestly, there's like such a hierarchy. It felt like in the top four teams that like they didn't even respect us, and the NALCS did a lot for like. Making them respect us, like respecting the fact that like, oh shit, like there is talent here. You know, it's not that there's no good practice, it's that our practice methods suck, or, you know, we're being very closed-minded about this. So, you know, I think the Season 3 kind of helped shine light on the fact that, you know, regions aren't limited to like 4 good teams, and that means there's only like 20 good players in the region. Like, absolutely not. There's talent coming in every day.
Because, I mean, I hope that question hasn't just totally answered what I'm about to ask now.
Yeah.
But when I look back at people who've made it since from that sort of group you're describing there, it seems to me like it's not like they came out of nowhere. They were always just below the pro level, and basically they never got a shot to prove themselves in a better team, you know.
Yeah.
And so I think of like, well, Wild Turtle's an obvious example, but another good one is ManCloud. Because I did an interview with ManCloud, and he told me like he always felt like he was like a similar level as a player. And the whole time he was there in MPWNA, and he said he never even got offers from any of the top. They never even considered him. And then obviously there's some of the people in your team who are actually placing highly and still not getting offers. And then a really good example is CLG spent all this time looking for a good support. And then, like I said, Bloodwater was in their B team, even trialed for them. He fails the trial, goes to your team, goes to the other one. And so it's like these players are almost like, that's like the obvious one you should give a chance to, you know. Is there really any other reason as to why they never got a chance? Do you think some of these people were tried out and they didn't make it? What do you think?
I know, like, for example, in the Bloodwater scenario with the CLG tryout, I really do think he probably did really well with them because he was on Azure Cats in the Season 3 qualifiers and people were like, Bloodwater's a god, Bloodwater's a god. I really think it was just that stigma of he's not good enough, let's just like get a big name, and eventually they went with like Afromu. It's like, that hilarious CLG potential thing. But like, there's a lot of potential with Afromu at support. You could see it like, oh, he plays bot lane, but like, I think the almost like the fans almost push them into it, push CLG into it. Because they're saying like, oh, he main support in WoW, like who the fuck cares about World of Warcraft?
Yeah.
And then like, yeah, he knows the bot lane from AD carry, and I know every support like in the world is sitting there like bullshit. Like he doesn't know anything about support. He probably knows the bot lane, but support now he's got so much to learn, and that kind of showed in the season 3. He was a very mediocre support in my opinion. But yeah, Bloodwater, I think it was just like the hierarchy of players that they just like thought Bloodwater was just an inferior player, so they didn't pick him. I really don't think like he did terribly in their practices at all. Like, I was only on a team with him for really a few weeks, and then he kind of dipped for Vulcan. But, he's got a great demeanor. He talks when he needs to. He's not overbearing, but he's a very good support.
So, yeah, let me think how to say this. Let me think. Okay, so when we think about these players like this,
yeah.
Again, I don't want it to sound like too obvious, this setup, but I think of like CLG is the perfect example, okay, because not only did they like almost refuse to pick up newer players, they would even do the weird thing like, we'll take this guy and put him in a role he's never even played before, as opposed to even give a chance to someone who plays that position. Mm-hmm. So from your perspective, like say you're an up-and-coming jungler, or like Bloodwater, he's an up-and-coming support, and then you see a team who's trying to put players who've never even played that position, does it feel like at the time like we could never even crack these top teams? Like unless our team can rise up like Cloud9 style, it's going to be impossible to even get into the top end of the scene. Because it's like that sort of a move, like we're going to take an AD carry and make him the support, is like saying we're never going to let anyone who's not a famous support be on this team almost.
Yeah, I mean, I think all the, I guess the bottom 4 teams you could say were really hungry to kind of crack them in a way. I know us, especially on Team Dynamic, like after Season 2, we kind of replaced a lot of the members on the team. A lot of people didn't want to do it anymore. Pixel was too young. So we ended up replacing 3/5 of the team like after that. And then we ended up, as GGU going into Season 3. So that was kind of difficult for us. I can't really speak too much about like cracking those top teams after that point because we were just trying to get into the LCS at that point. But yeah, I mean, it didn't feel like if you were gonna get booted from your team on a lower tier team that like the higher team, like he's booted from that team, no way he's playing for us type deal. So like I remember even like when I was jungling in mid Season 2, I found that I wasn't struggling at all against like Saint Vicious and Odd One, and those were like the two. People were like Saint and Odd One, Saint and Odd One. Those are the two best junglers, Saint and Odd One. I was like, well, what about me? Like, what am I doing so wrong? I seem to like counter jungle them well every game, do really well. But I mean, I think a lot of that comes back to like the hierarchy of the top 4 teams. They just, even if they lose, they're like, oh, they're still trash. And a really good example of that is I remember during the Season 3 qualifiers when we did qualify, we ended up beating a team called Dirtnap Gaming, and Don't Match Me played Vayne the first game, and after that game, Doublelift went on Twitter trash-talking his Vayne. Even though he had a great, fantastic Vayne game, Doublelift would just kind of went on there and just like, what a shit Vayne, or something like that. And it was just like, just that really annoying stigma that these higher-up teams had. Not so much, and when I say these higher-up teams, I don't feel like it was as much Dignitas. I felt like it was a lot CLG, a little bit TSM, a little more than TSM Cursed kind of was too.
Because the thing is, with hindsight, obviously it's easy for me to be like, oh, you idiots, you should have picked up him here and all. But at the same time, I feel like people sometimes go too much the other way. So because a lot of people maybe only started really following outside of those top teams in LCS, so they'll want to make it sound like the Vulcan and, well, it later became GGU, they make it sound like these teams really are just an LCS success story. Like, oh, see, what happened is Riot gave them a salary, and so then they knew how to really play, and they were really practicing, and that's why they rose up or whatever. But as I've described before, these teams were already having results, or these players were playing well. So is it really too much to say that, okay, I'll give you 2 examples. So supposedly Reginald, for quite a while, hasn't actually wanted to play the game. He just did it because he couldn't think of a good mid who could replace him okay.
Yeah.
But the whole time, ManCloud has been sat there in like MTWNA and then in Vulcan. And I'm sure if you'd have asked him back then, before Vulcan became a top team, he'd have probably jumped at the chance to be like a mid. Likewise, the Bloodwater one's an obvious one because they needed a support for this Doublelift guy. They could never get one and he was waiting there the whole time.
Yeah.
If we just put these guys in like a year before, do they actually play the way they do now? Is there a degree to which like being an LCS changed them in some way? How do you balance it up?
It's kind of hard to say that LCS did it. LCS might have expedited it a little bit, but I think it was honestly just a matter of time until like they started cracking and we kind of started, knocking down the door of the CLGs, the TSMs, and really toward the end of season 2, it was kind of showing because I remember Legion took a game off CLG, who had, fresh out of coming from Korea with all their crazy cheesy strats. They dropped a game to Legion of all teams, who was looking terrible at MLG before that, which was kind of weird. And then we were pretty competitive with Dignitas in our matches as well. Second game, not so much, but like we were competitive with them. And we'd always been competitive with Dignitas, so that's a pretty bad example. But yeah, I mean, it was probably only a matter of time until teams, eventually not necessarily took the throne, but like kind of started to, give them a run for their money. And Orbit Gaming, who a lot of the players from there, it kind of like Cloud9 is kind of what Orbit Gaming was back then, because it had high Elimination, so that's kind of your roots. And then that team was just chock full of star power. It had
wasn't Niantonso on there?
Niantonso was the AD carry there, who of course is on CLG as a top laner now.
Sure.
It's funny how those players became top laners, because Yuzuki, who's on the Walking Zed, fantastic top laner. And they also had Nubby Pooh Bear, and then after Nubby got benched, they took Wild Turtle. Like so much star power was on that team. So I really think it was only a matter of time until, even if the LCS wasn't here, that these teams started to rise up.
We've mentioned Bloodwater already,
Mm-hmm.
and obviously the reason that's significant going into like season 3 was that he was like on your team during the middle part of the season for like quite a chunk of the season, but your team was doing terribly. Then he goes to Vulcan, who themselves, they were like doing better in the standings, but they weren't like blowing everyone out of the water. I think they were like 5th at the time or something.
Yeah.
So what was he actually, like it's always hard to tell when a player goes to a team and then the team themselves do better like collectively. Is it like the group that's so good, like the unit that's so good, or was that player so good and he added something? Like was he as good when he was in GGU as he was later in Vulcan? Was he Godwater already?
I mean, he was already Godwater, but I really don't, coming to Vulcan, I don't really think he brought that much. I think it was just really the friendship, and not necessarily the friendship, but really knowing how to play with Bloodwater that Benny and Zuna had with him was pretty important in him coming over. It just wasn't working with Zuna and Muffin Cutie. They were just a really big hindrance. And, Zuna gets a lot of flack for being a pretty not so good AD carry right now as it is. So Bloodwater was like a really good addition to that team. I don't hold anything against Blood for that. Like GGU was kind of in a weird spot. Like we were subbing out Shifter because he couldn't make it to the US, and then switching out supports. Like it would seem like every 2 weeks. So I don't really hold anything against him for leaving, and he definitely is a lot better on Vulcan than he would have ever been on GGU. He was just kind of like a band-aid for us. But I really think Vulcan, even without Bloodwater, still would have gotten really good, because they really want to win. Like looking back even to CLG Black, like they didn't make it to the playoffs of season 2 just because they got in the circuit so late, so they didn't get enough points. But toward the end of the season, they were still a really good team.
So I want to set up the spring playoffs, right? Because when people hear you came second, it'll sound like, oh, well, that was a logical progression of they were working, they were building together. But explain this to me like this, okay? How does a team which loses like this really good support to another team late in the season, they lose this player Shifter who you wanted to be like your star mid laner or whatever, you have all these problems in the season, you guys were terrible. You had like a 39% win rate over the whole season. You're losing to most teams, Yeah. How do you go from that to somehow even doing better than Bloodwater's team, coming second in the whole thing, beating Dignitas, beating Curse, almost beating TSM? How can that even happen?
I mean, it all probably started because like even into week 10, we were still fighting for a spot in the playoffs. And I think once we knew we were in the playoffs, we were really only thinking one thing. Win this set against Dignitas, for one, to get our revenge for all that shit on Team Dynamic, and two, to like have job security. And those were like the two most important things. So we worked our asses off really after that week 10 to beat Dignitas. We knew we could. We had actually beaten them in our last meeting, so we were like, yeah, we got kind of momentum going into this. That, in addition to like the meta really favored us at that point because it allowed Zion to just take games over. In addition to, it really helped really everybody because it allowed Jinte to play pretty passive mids. Like, Jinte right now is not that amazing of a mid laner. He's a passive mid laner. he's kind of struggling to learn the Ziggs. He's a great Orianna, obviously, but Ziggs, Ahri's kind of popular. And Kha'Zix is becoming popular. Like, I don't see him playing a Kha'Zix anywhere in his future. He just prefers the sit-back mages. And the meta really favored what he was doing at the time, which really worked in our favor. So I think it was a combination of how the meta progressed, as well as we really wanted that revenge against Dignitas. As far as the rest of the run, we thought, well, who cares now? We have our job security. Let's just play our asses off. And it was a lot of pressure off after it didn't matter after that, except for money. We're just the better we do, we can't hurt ourselves if we play bad. Oh well, if we play bad. I think a lot of that pressure off really makes everybody play better. And that's what really helped us to, almost beat TSM in the finals.
Whenever a big team loses a game they're supposed to lose,
Yeah.
they're supposed to win, they always obviously are going to say, well, we played badly. It's very rare they're going to give credit to the team that beat them.
Yeah.
And vice versa. If a team scores an upset on a big team, they never want to consider, well, maybe that team played badly. They want to think, no, we actually went up to their level and we went above them. So the reason I'm setting it up like this is because the 3 teams you played, Dignitas, Curse, and TSM, those are actually the only 3 teams, when I looked it up, that you had a losing record versus in the season. So these are the teams that on paper, you definitely shouldn't have been able to beat these 3. So you beat the first 2 and lost to TSM narrowly. Was there a degree to which, because we know Curse had been leading the whole league, then they dropped off in the last week. Dignitas, same thing, second the whole time, then drop off. Was there a degree to which you felt like they went down to your level and you met them there or something? What happened?
I think, again, it was kind of a weird mix of the meta favoring us. I think we really favored out some really good picks that ended up becoming popular before anybody else. Toward that end of the season, that was really good for us. I really do think we played really well toward the end. Obviously, Dignitas and Curse were kind of playing poorly, but they both should have been able to beat us no problem, the way we were playing, even into Week 10. I think we lost to Complexity in Week 10, who took 8th place at the end of the LCS. That was one of our last matches we lost to Complexity. That was embarrassing to us. But yeah, they really shouldn't have had that big of a problem taking us down unless we kind of played our asses off. And that's what we did. We tried to shake it up. They probably don't want to admit that, we played better, but I think in their hearts they know, all right, they're a lot better than we played in Week 3. They're awful then, that type of thing.
Because the strange thing is, in that season, you guys came second, but also famously Vulcan came third.
Yeah.
And they beat Curse even in the third place game. So basically both you teams only lost to TSM, who at the time were the kings of NA or whatever.
Yeah.
But the bizarre thing is, I get the sense that even though they've just lost to you, all these other teams, the Dignitas, CLG, Curse, I think they still believed in that old mentality of the big 4 and all that.
Yeah.
Because you'd think to yourself, I come from the world of Counter-Strike, okay.
Yeah.
And in Counter-Strike, it was almost like Korea is in League of Legends now.
Mm-hmm.
If you see someone who's a star in a team below you and the team's getting good, not only do you recruit him because you want the talent and bring him into your team, but you instantly kill that team then. If you take the star, if you take ManCloud out of Vulcan straight after that and give him a super good salary, Vulcan's probably dead, they're not going to be as good again. So it's strange again to wonder, why do these teams not recruit players from GGU, from Vulcan? Do you think that they still hadn't figured out that you were actually good? Do you think they didn't believe?
I mean, I still think there's a lot of doubt after the spring playoffs, just because people were quicker to blame, the format rather than give props to the lower teams who played well. Oh, there's no way Vulcan and GGU should have taken 2 and 3. That's crap. Dignitas is playing so well weeks 2 through 7 and all that. And yeah, I still think there's a lot of doubt in those higher up teams that we were any good. Just today, I heard Doublelift say in an interview, NintendudeX is a good jungler. I've never heard those words out of his mouth. Yeah. Never in my life. I've always heard oh, trash, mediocre, blah, 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 blah. Just today, I finally got credit from Doublelift. That's a life thing for me. That's huge. But yeah, I even back then, I thought there was a lot of doubt.
Because the thing is, this might seem unfair, but okay, so you guys had this awesome run at the end of the season. Yeah. Especially the TSM one, even though you actually lost that series, was maybe more impressive because it was the full best of 5, and you got them to game 5, so it was wow, no one could have expected that. But then it looks really bad for anyone who was saying it's not a fluke, that the next season, you guys actually did you even got the players you wanted, you got Shifter in the team and stuff, but then on paper you did even worse. You had 32% win rate or something, and obviously you didn't actually get into the playoffs that time. So what really happened? How could your team be so awesome in that playoff run and people think, oh, they figured it out, they're going to be a top team, and now you dropped right off? What's your perspective on the next season?
In the summer split, the season 3, we had just started living with each other. Like, that's when we got the gaming house. That's when we kind of caught up to the other teams. And I think that kind of hurt us because, it's kind of annoying when somebody, uses your milk or, like, does that. And you start to kind of like, that's annoying. And we just needed that, like, little period to grow as a team. And I think now we're at, like, a very good spot as a team where, like, we all like each other. We're all happy with the roster. We're ready to just drive forward and win. We're used to it. But, going into it, we all moved in about a week before the split start. And pretty hilariously enough, we started playing pretty well at the beginning of the split. But from there, it was just like the practice regimen and stuff, like we couldn't like figure it out. Like nothing was working for us. And a lot of the stuff, like the Elements was setting up, like it wasn't, results weren't happening because of it. Elements was our coach at the time. He was trying to like get us up early and, we do this and then practice for however, and then do this, and then we go to bed. Like setting a schedule for us. It was like, I did that for however long, and then we'd change it because it wasn't working. Do that for however long, it wasn't working. So eventually, at the end, after we were up for relegation, we decided, all right, like, this isn't working. We kind of got to get back to our old thing, like it was working for us at the end of the spring split, and just like do our own thing and see if we can, maybe make something happen there. And it did end up working because we, started to crush the amateur scene. Granted, they're the amateur scene. We were pretty pleased with how it was going, but really we just couldn't find what was working for us during, we couldn't find anything to work for us during the summer split. It was really frustrating because we kept losing and losing and losing. It was really funny because I remember going into the Super Week, week 10 of the summer split, we were like, all right, we're really good because we're beating Dignitas in scrims. And Dignitas, like, for whatever reason, they're like one of the only teams we scrimmed, and like we really struggled against them in scrims. And we for whatever reason thought like, yeah, they're going to be really strong. And like Dignitas was not that good of a team that week. We were like, oh crap. Like, we've got to really get our shit together. We're struggling against Dignitas. They're getting shit on by Curse type deal. So I think we kind of, after that happened, we realized like, all right, maybe we should like be begging Cloud9 for scrims and like stuff like that. Like really pound out top teams to get better. And that's what we ended up doing during the off season after they came back from their break. We started like playing Cloud9 to the point where we keep playing Cloud9 until we took a scrim off them. Because, during the entire summer split, like we did not take one scrim off of Cloud9. They were that good. And we're at the point where like, not too consistently, probably I'd say like, we probably go like 30-70 with them now, but like we were taking scrims off Cloud9, and that's like, it feels really good because they're the strongest team in NA coming out of season 3 or whatever. So, we're confident now.
So since you were around for all this time, and
Yeah.
crucially you were outside of the Big Four, so you were seeing all the other amateur teams, semi-pros or whatever, around your level all the way through, you've seen Cloud9 come from, in theory, nobodies, and then as a whole 5-man team go right to the top of LCS.
Yeah.
So how did that happen from your perspective? What were they good at? What did they change? What did they have that no one else had?
For one, I think High and Lemonation, as a two, they really have a good thing where High can lead and Lemonation can kind of theory things. And I think those two brains put together worked really well for them. As well as they made some great acquisitions. Balls was always a player on MTW who was always solid, but really on one of the lower level teams. Like another solid player that probably a top team could have picked up because he showed like he was a great player, a great top laner, just like crushing people during the summer split. And they had Wild Turtle, then they got Sneaky, who was another lower tier team player, but he ended up being really good. Sneaky's a really good AD carry. So, as well as Meteos, who kind of came out of nowhere. He really wasn't on any lower team.
How could he completely come out of nowhere? You hadn't even seen him on solo queue. He wasn't even rank 5s or anything.
I mean, we saw him on solo queue, and he was bouncing around a couple teams.
And was he good?
He was okay, but his teams weren't that good. So it's kind of hard to see, like, is Meteos good? Like, I'm not really sure because we're just kind of crushing his team. He probably could be if he had a better team type deal. I always knew Meteos, like, could probably be pretty good. But to get to the Cloud9 level and just like completely demolish everybody, like no, that took us all off guard. Like I did not expect that at all. But I think he just really knew how to play the jungle better than anyone. Like I think something clicked. Like maybe after a scrim he played, after a solo queue game, something just clicked with him. He was like, I just got to do this every time, and we're gonna win every game. That's like what they did. he would just farm harder than the other jungler. He'd hit 6 faster, and then that means they get a faster dragon, a faster push, a faster something. And just being an objective game from there, and it's just like, dude, I can't breathe. And it's like insanely difficult to play against. And then like eventually people caught on. I think like we were all getting crushed during the regular season, so I especially was like, all right, let's see him play against like a foreign team and see how they deal with it. And just kind of watching Fnatic deal with it, it's like, oh, okay, like you can beat Cloud9.
What do you think they did specifically to do that?
It was just like they caught him a lot in rotation. They were like, it was just like they would go in spots you wouldn't expect. It's almost like a play style that we like to run now, where we like to have like mid have a heavy assassin like shift on Ari or Zed or something, and like just be in really awkward spots, and then like have your team push, and then when they try to rotate, just have them just like pick someone off, and then you 5 go up and push, and then get another turret or something like that. They just like countered their fast push really well, and it was like something that Cloud9 was caught off guard by because nobody in North America was doing it.
Because when you talk about Meteos like that, like I've heard from other players, they said like when they'd seen him in solo queue, they were like, well, there's no reason to think this is going to be some super duper jungler
Oh
guy.
yeah.
Well, the weird thing is, so the joke in Cloud9 from the fans is always like, oh, Elimination like created this robot who's like the perfect jungler thing. But there's a degree to which I could see why there's a logic to that, because it seems like his style is actually predicated on the whole team being set up to let him do that. Like I can't think of many, because most teams build their team around the solo laners.
Yeah.
There's very few teams who would ever have a mid who would be like, no, just take my buff, like, and farm some of my lane as well. Like that would never really happen. So is there something unique about their setup in that sense? Have other people tried that and it didn't work before? Have you ever seen that style before?
I mean, a lot of that I think really comes from Hyde being a jungler himself, coming from the jungle, realizing how powerful like Meteos can be if he takes that buff. And that's a trust that a lot of mid and jungle like they don't have, because like mid doesn't understand like how big that second blue buff helps him or whatever. It's just like Hyde just understood really and knew like, hey, if I can win my lane or like go even in my lane without that blue buff, he's gonna make a play elsewhere. He's gonna overpower the other jungler. And he just had that overall understanding of like what Meteos wanted to do. And maybe that wasn't even Meteos' style. Maybe they tailored it into him. I don't know. But it sure worked out, and I really think it had mostly to do with the fact that Hyde used to be a jungler himself.
So the other obvious modern day jungler to talk about is like Smithy from XDGG/Vulcan. Now with this player, the reason he's most notable, even though he's a really good player, is because him becoming good sort of enabled ManCloud to become like the monster everyone thinks he is now. Because the combo at the end of Season 3 was so powerful, you know, the mid-jungler synergy. You must have seen Nick Smithy as well. Did something change about how he played or approached the game? Like, what did you think of him in this last split, and, you know, how do you describe him?
Smithy's kind of been like going back to like the lower 4 compared to the higher 4. Like he was always kind of my rival in the lower 4. Like we were probably the two best junglers in the lower tier, because it was like me, him, Zuna, and like Lotta Mortis, who like Lotta Mortis just wasn't consistent enough in my opinion, in a lot of people's opinion, but like they still love him as a person. So I love Lotta Mortis. So I think it was like I had kind of had a rivalry with Smithy, and we've always kind of played the same champions. I remember it like really bothered me. Like I'd play Olaf, and then like he'd pick it up randomly, like, well, you stole that from me. And then I'd play Jungle Riven, like, holy crap, he's playing Jungle Riven. Like, stop that, Smithy. It's really funny because I think for a while he kind of had that copycat mentality, like, okay, what they're doing is really good, but he's really found like champions that he's comfortable with, and like it doesn't feel the need to like go with the flow of other people now. And like his Lee Sin's insane, his Vi's really good. He's just got like his own champions, and he's always been like everybody's always said like Smithy's solid mechanics. It's always been like his decision making that's been questionable, and I think that comfort on the champions makes the decisions a little bit easier for him. And yeah, I mean, I really think it has to do with like something clicked with him. Like certain junglers, like I'm really good at Lee Sin. I'm just gonna play this when it's up every time. I'm gonna play Vi when it's necessary. Really, I really think of Lee Sin and Vi for him, since that's why I'm using the examples. But yeah, I think he just kind of found his groove while the whole team found their groove, and that's like why he's looking so good.
So since those are the two like modern day reference points, and they have such differing styles, like compare yourself to the two of them. What do you share in common with them? Is there something you're better at, they're better at? How do you explain it in that sense?
I feel like I'm a much better leader than either of them. Smithy, even still, is kind of, XDGG members talk about how he doesn't communicate like as well. He doesn't like Smithy doesn't make the calls, or like there's always a joke like, oh, Smithy made that call when like they mess up or something.
Okay.
And Meteos really doesn't. Meteos kind of seems like he orders people like around him like what to do to help him type deal. Like, all right, push that out for me, or like go take my wraith, I'll take your mid or something like that. But I really myself, I think I play more like Smithy, where I try to bring early pressure. I really don't like playing like Meteos because I don't like. I know I have superstars on my team, like Shifter and Zion Spartan, and now with Fusion too. Like those guys can just straight up carry me. So I'm gonna do whatever I can to make that necessary. So I've really tried to be more of like a leadership, I guess you could say, shot caller. I still don't think I'm a true shot caller because everybody still has a very big voice on this team. You know, I don't order everything around, but I do call most of the early games. So I think I'm responsible for. I think I'm like responsible for being a very good early game jungler, more like a Smithy than a Meteos at all.
So when we described the earlier part,
Yeah.
and you said about how when you were in those fourth place teams in 2012, it was easy to think, well, I'm playing well against Saint Vicious or the odd one now. I'm doing as well. Like, why can't I be picked up? It sounds like, you know, you had the confidence. You thought like I could be
Yeah.
a top player. So okay, at the time you could at least put it down to like, oh well, you know, it's like bias. The top four teams won't even look at us guys. But then you see like Smithy and Meteos have sort of like overtaken you, leapfrogged, and now they're at
Yeah.
the top of the scene. Ignoring the fact that, listen, NintendudeX loves his teammates, they're all great guys, yeah, he's going to stay in this team. Do you ever feel jealous at all? Like, oh, like where was my chance to be in like the top two teams in NA, you know?
I mean, kind of, but I realize like I still have time. Like I'm only 19 years old. Like there's still time for me. I can still reach that point. And really, you know, I get a little jealous, but I realize like I'm pretty content with what I've done so far as well because I still have a lot of fans, like a lot more than I had like a year ago. Just so many fans. I'm like so grateful for that. And I just feel if I just keep trying to be a positive person, you know, try and lead my team around, trying to do what's best for them and like get them big, they can carry me to a grander stage. So like maybe a light will shine on me and I'll get a little bit of credit, but you know, really I'm just there for them. I want to see them do well.
In the last split, because Cloud9 just dominated the whole thing, it was easy for people to say, oh, well, Meteos, he's the star of Cloud9 and he's the jungler, he must definitely be the best NA jungler.
Yeah.
But I think after Worlds, I actually saw like a shift. Like suddenly people are like, oh no, actually Smithy's really good. Now it's like people, you can tell almost either by who they actually secretly hate or just which team they're friends with. That seems to be like how they split on which one they think is the better jungler, because it's such a different style as well, like it's going to be subjective. For NintendudeX, if there was a gun to your head and you had to pick which one's the best just as a jungler,
Yeah.
which is the best of the two right now, do you think? On your own subjective criteria, obviously.
I'm going to say Smithy.
Okay, why?
I think Meteos, I think the way Season 4 patches now, his playstyle's a little too selfish. And really in scrims it kind of shows like he's kind of selfish and can lead to like solo lane deficits where we can just crush the game from there. Whereas Smithy, he's still a very selfless player. He will get ahead, but it'll be from crushing you, not from out-farming you. Like, he'll deny you to get ahead, not, like, out-farm you to get ahead. So I really think Smithy's probably... It's so hard to say, like, the best NA jungler, because I don't want to say Smithy's the best NA jungler, because I don't think he is.
Oh, okay.
But, like...
What do you mean you don't think he is? You just told me he is.
I mean, if it's between Smithy and Meteos,
Okay.
yeah, but...
There's another person that should be in this mix?
I mean, it's such a hard thing to say, because...
Well, I mean, it's your own
Yeah.
subjective opinion, so who?
Okay.
You must have an opinion on who it is. There's someone outside of those two, maybe?
Not really, because it's so weird in North America right now. Because you got like these random European junglers coming in. Like it's crazy to think that we're gonna have like Snoop and Dexter potentially like jungling in NA. Like what? That only leaves like 6 of us true like North American junglers. It's like me, the odd one, Dominate, who I think's really good as well. Smithy, Meteos, and whoever. Wait, I'm missing one.
Well, there's another team to play. There's Curse and...
Oh, I already said Dominate. He hasn't even qualified.
Yeah.
Yet. Oh, darn. But yeah, crap, who's the last one? And Crumbs. Crumbs is great too. Actually, yeah, with that list, Smithy's the best NA jungler out of any of them.
Okay.
I'm sorry we went through all
okay.
that, but yeah, it's just such a weird period right now where it's like the off season of Season 3, going headstrong into Season 4. We're all about to find out, but yeah, Smithy probably the best NA jungler in my books for right now.
So you mentioned the Europeans are coming over. So Snoopy's a perfect example to pick for this question, which is that I get the sense that a lot of NA players, in the same way as, okay, I'll give you an example. In Korea, when like Mac Noon used to be the absolute best top laner, when he fell off a bit, I used to see people on Reddit like, oh, Mac Noon is shit now. And I would think like, come on guys, if he went to some other regions, he'd probably like beast the whole region. Oh yeah, he's not as good as the top three guys. So I always felt like when some of the people talked about the EG players in Europe, who were still placing third and fourth, they were like, oh, of course, Yellow Pete is trash, you know. Snoopy, he dropped off a long time ago. And so people are worried now that Snoopy and them are coming over to NA. Like, oh, well, I mean, Cupid even made a joke. Like, if they do really well, that means NA is trash. It's not that they're good, it's that NA is trash. So you must have seen, just because of how famous Snoopy was and all his teams, there was a time when he was very good and everything fit his style. There was a time when maybe he had a lot of problems in Europe. Knowing what you saw from the qualifier where they 3-0'd, how would Snoopy stack up, do you think, against the NA junglers? Will there be deficits there that he won't be able to overcome?
I think he's going to struggle. I really do feel like NA junglers are better than a lot of other regions. Maybe not. Damn, like Europe's got such an edge on North America right now. Like NA's been playing so horrible in the Battle of the Atlantic. It's really hard to say, but I really do think for a long period of time, maybe not now, I'm not sure, that NA had the better junglers, because there was a lot of names that like I could name off from NA, and then in EU it's like, oh, there's Diamond. Like, who else? Like, well, Snoopy, I guess, but it's like Froggen carries them, so you wouldn't really consider like, because Diamond would like smash Snoopy every time, so it's like, is Snoopy really a top jungler? Is Diamond just that far ahead? Is EU just full of bad jungler? You don't know. So, I mean, it's a very biased for me to think that like NA had the better junglers, because I really didn't pay that much attention to EU. But I don't know. I think NA junglers are very underrated. I think like the crew we have now is very like the odd one's getting old. I think the odd one probably won't be playing for much more than a couple more seasons just because of age and obviously all that stuff. But really, other than that, I think like myself, Crumbs, Meteos, Smithy, I Will Dominate, like that's really solid. Like Dominate was even playing in Season 2. I remember playing a lot against I Will Dominate on Dignitas. They'd always beat us, and it was really frustrating. He was really good. And, Crumbs, fantastic player on Dignitas. People would argue he's the best player on that team. Meteos, obviously Meteos. Smithy, getting a lot of fame lately. And then there's little old me, but that doesn't matter. But, I do think North America does have really good junglers. And I do think that Snoopy's going to struggle kind of adapting, because a lot of it's just adapting. Even if you're, really good, if they play something completely wacky, you might just lose just because, you don't know how to play against it.
So since you referenced the odd one, and earlier on we mentioned St. Vicious, since you were around for the Season 2 heyday when they were winning or they were considered very good, now with St. Vicious, I think the storyline, people think it's simple, okay? They think when he was in CLG he was really good, and then he went to Curse, he sort of figured out after a little while in Curse, it's never going to be like it was in CLG, I'm probably never even going to win events, I'm in Curse, but I'm getting some sick money, let's just chill back, do what we can, if we do well, it's okay. Yeah. It's easy to say, oh, maybe he just lost motivation. And then the odd one, people actually usually say that he's getting old, as though he's like a 40-year-old football player or something, still a 20-something-year-old guy. What's your perspective? How good were they in their prime? When was their prime? And do you see a period where they went downhill a bit, or people overtook them, or caught up, or what?
That's really weird because, coming from one of the bottom tier teams, a lot of us had advantages and disadvantages on a lot of the top tier teams. And as a jungler, I've never really struggled with I've never really struggled with the odd one, because TSM has always been known for really crazy aggressive level 1s and level 2s back in their heyday in Season 2, and I just that didn't really faze me at all just because I know what to do against it, and I really never struggled that much against the odd one, even though nobody got to see it because we never played in tournaments. But St. Vicious, yeah, he was obviously really good, and obviously doesn't want to play anymore because he doesn't think he can ever be at that level again. And odd one, just based on my experience, through Season 3, I just don't think his mechanics are quite... I think it's coming down to a lot of mechanical play. You can see the mechanical play gets tighter each and every season. People are, doing abilities, then flashes, and then, the ability will hit them after the flash. And, people are just finding out these little intricacies that weren't even there, in Season 2, or people didn't know to look for. So I think like that is really might end up being the doom of the odd one. It might be too much for him. You know, he might just retire and like walk off into the sunset or whatever. But you know, who knows? Maybe he could play for another 5, 10 years if he really wants to. It's really what he wants, and if he can keep up.
So you mentioned Saint Vicious. He was like, in terms of matchup for you, was a harder one.
Yeah.
I feel like Saint Vicious, not only with like his level dropping and then being in curse, he wasn't going to win. It also feels like that joke of like he misses every smite has like overtaken any of his past glory.
Yeah.
Like, everyone thinks he sucks now, basically. When he was actually at his best, what was his style? What was he good at?
His style was like just really, really smart counter gang. Like not necessarily like counter gangs, just it felt like he always knew right where you were. And you know, he was really famous for a lot of Udyr play. And I hate playing against Udyrs. I remember when Jat played Udyr in like season 1. Playing against Jat was like the worst. And just really, it just seemed like he always knew where you were, whereas the odd one kind of had this style like he wants to come find you. And you know, if you never know where the other guy's at and he knows where you're at, and he just like turns things around on you, it's just like you have to make that snap decision. It's just like you're not ready for it in like a 2v2 or like a 3v3 bottom or something. And Saint just like would do that, and then he'd be like levels ahead of you, almost like, you know, Saint said like, oh, I was doing what Meteos did like 2 years ago. And it's kind of true, because he would just like get these level gaps on you and just like crush it forward and really just win his team the game. And I really like struggled with that, because I'd be used to like, you know, the odd one wanted to scrap with me level 1, level 2. I don't know, just St. Vicious would just like farm to level 4 and then like come find me, and I'm like level 3, and it's like crap. You know, he's gonna hit level 5 off that, and I'm still struggling to level 4, and then he ganks, and then I'm behind, and then it's just a disaster from there. So yeah, I struggled a lot against St. Vicious.
Part of the reason why at the beginning I wanted to like gauge your thoughts on the Diamond procs, like fake diss or whatever, where he said the comment about like, oh, goodbye and A or whatever, is because one of the few constants in all of my grilled interviews was every time I ever asked anyone who even wasn't a jungler, like who they want for their all-star jungle position, like the only name I always got was Diamond Prox. And the only person who ever said that Diamond Prox maybe wasn't like the best jungler ever is Saint.
Saint Vicious.
He was a bit mad that like Diamond had dissed him maybe or something.
Yeah.
So I wanted to get your take, okay. Since the rep is so high for Diamond Prox, like everyone lists him, he's the best jungler ever, he's the best now, or whatever, you know, his style. And I get the sense for junglers in general, because his style is so sexy, like he's controlling the whole game, he's dominating everyone. It's like they all, in a way, they all look up to him a bit, like, oh, I wish I could play that style, I wish I had a team that let me. What do you think of Diamond Prox? Does he fit this mold?
I think he just like, he's been so consistent. You know, in tournament matches, you never really see Diamond Prox have an off game. And if you do, like Gambit, like sometimes in the LCS, he'd have an off game, and Gambit would just kind of like lose. And like, what the hell happened to Gambit? Like, they look terrible. But like when Diamond's in his zone, he in a way just like carries Gambit, or like he gets that fire going in Gambit where they're like, oh, okay, Diamond's getting big. Let's all do our part. We're just gonna win, like so easy. And that like ever since season 2, that's just kind of been a thing. When Diamond's on his game, they just win and win and win. And you know, one of the exceptions was just where they lost to this Taipei Assassins. You know, they were almost in the finals of season 2, and I think would have won season 2 if they went to the finals. And they're like, I truly believe they were like one game away from winning season 2. So, you know, Diamond Prox obviously is very easy to respect as a jungler. He's just so consistent and so good, and like so confident with so many of his innovations. Like when he like made Volibear and Nasus popular, like out of nowhere, like what? Nasus jungle? Now it's kind of a thing, but back then you thought like, no, Nasus is just like this weird top laner that can't fight for like 30 minutes. And it's really funny that St. Vicious gives Diamond Prox, like, isn't willing to give him credit, because I remember after he was playing Nasus and Volibear, that's Diamond Prox, St. Vicious, what are his next 2 pickups? Volibear and Nasus. Like, how can you not give this guy credit? He's incredible. That's like how I feel.
I think the tough thing when you're trying to break down, I mean, it's like an old saying that like, oh, you can't judge the jungler on his own, because obviously it depends what his teammates are. And so that really is like the problem when you're trying to figure out in Gambit, like who is the genius in Gambit, who's the one playing? Because on one hand, yeah, Diamond Prox is ganking everywhere on the map, and when he does that, it looks like, wow, he just controls the whole game. But at the same time, Alex Ich is like the strategy of Moscow 5 always seems to be like, get Alex Ich to just carry the whole game, you know. Yeah. So you're always wondering when you're looking at the two, like, is it that Diamond Prox like does like an odd one on Reggie, like he makes sure Alexic gets super big and then he carries the game? Is it that since you've got amazing Alexic, who's a really awesome player, that he then makes all the ganks from Diamond look awesome because he's completing them all? How would you break that up? How would you describe it from your perspective?
Well, the mid lane jungle synergy is like very, very important. And I think people started to realize this like toward the end of Season 3, and I think is a lot of why, you know, Cloud9 did so well. You didn't really see much mid lane jungle synergy outside of like maybe the odd one camping Reginald, really in Season 2, or not Season 2, but like early in Season 3. Like, you never really saw St. Vicious camping for Nijaki. You never really saw, you know, crap, who was jungling on CLG at that point? You never really saw Chowster coming mid for Link. There just wasn't any of that. And people are starting to realize if you get your mid ahead and your jungle ahead, those two can just like, kind of like if they want to go bottom, they can make a 4-man play and get a turret. Like, they kind of control the entire map in a sense, because mid can go to either top or bottom. They can go wherever they want, and the jungle has always been like that too. So it's like, you know, if those two have really good synergy and they like can kind of determine the pace of the game, and you know, they're just going to carry the game. And that's like, I think Alex and Diamond kind of figured that out a long time ago. That I think I know I'm just kind of catching on to now. I think a lot of people are catching on to now is like how important the mid and jungle synergy is. It doesn't really have to be synergy, it really has to be control. And Diamond and Alex, they've like seen it all. They can control the game just with themselves.
I know you watch OGN.
Yeah.
If you had to give let's say imagine a European person is watching this, not Diamond Prox, and they're like, who is NintendudeX? I've never heard of him. So to give them a reference point, give me like a Korean jungler who plays in any way like NintendudeX plays. Who's the closest?
It's kind of a cocky example, but I'm going to say Bengi, just because,
okay.
Honestly...
World champion?
He's a world champion, obviously, but honestly, he's really not a superstar. You know, when you think of SK Telecom T1, you think of Faker. And if you're not thinking of Faker, it's maybe Piglet. Just maybe Piglet. It's usually Faker, though. And, you know, Shifter is, like, my most important person to get fed. And I like Bengi a lot of the time, you know, does help Faker get big through crazy flash cocoon plays. And I think our champion pools are very similar, too, besides the fact that I don't really like Nunu jungle, and they, like, make it work somehow. But, you know, that's really, a lot of the time, is my prerogative, to get mid ahead. And, you know, so me and Shifter can go roam around the map and, you know, win the game. You know, he can make big plays, because he makes big plays. And people, like, really respect Shifter. So, like, I try and make the light shine even brighter on him. It's, like, as best as I can, because I know he can carry.
Okay, so for my hypothetical question, the setup, it's the same old one, okay?
Okay.
These fucking aliens come down again. They kill everyone else on your team, but this time there's a twist, okay? They've heard the rest of this interview, and they're like, oh, that really sucks that he was always, like, 4th in tournaments, and then, you know, other people overtook him who were, like, his peers. You know, NintendudeX never got that chance to be in the best team in NA. So what they're going to do for you is, since they've killed all your teammates, they've got to do something for you, you know, to make up for that. So they say, right, well, we killed all his teammates, but we'll let him pick from all the other NA players out there, LCS and out of LCS. And the idea is he has to just create the team where this is going to let NintendudeX be the best jungler and on the best team in NA. So how would you set up the other 4 members around you to make NintendudeX, this is like the NintendudeX all-star team, to make him the best? What would you need, what type of player do you want from the rest of the NA talent pool?
I think I'd want... For mid lane... Damn, that's hard. How does he need a minute to think? Who's top lane right now? Okay, for top lane, I'd probably say Quas from Curse.
Oh, okay.
He has a playstyle very similar to how Zion Spartan plays, and that's just something that I'm very comfortable with, and I know how to get ahead, know how to get rolling. And like he's just gonna crush. That's gonna allow me to crush too. For mid lane, I'm gonna say Pobelter, because Pobelter is extremely talented. You know, very young, and really has that ability to carry the game on his own as well. He's got very high mechanics, and I think he can outplay anybody he wants to. He really thinks one step ahead of people. As far as the bot lane goes, I'd probably make my support and AD carry. I'd honestly take Xpecial and Wild Turtle, because those two, they seem to be working really well together, as well as I think Wild Turtle's probably... He's one of those AD carries that it seems like even if you get him behind, he's not really behind. He's always going to be in that team fight and be really strong. It seems like you can never take Wild Turtle out of the game. That's how I feel. And Xpecial is just like universally good. He's like a monster on Thresh. He's like on point on Sona. Like he's the jack of all trades and just knows the support role so well. And I just think that like he's a really strong support, as well as Wild Turtle being an amazing AD carry. I'd like to thank CyberPower PC, LOL Class, and ClickPoint Software, and of course Team Coast, all my teammates, any family, friends watching this. And thanks for watching.